Movie lovers, Avengers Endgame is finally here and it gave us a ton to talk about. We're gonna do things a little differently and dive deep into spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen Endgame, please come back when you have. For everyone else, enjoy our in-depth discussion of the massive conclusion to Marvel's Infinity Saga. I'm John Battiston, and this is Real Underdogs. Welcome to Real Underdogs, your friends at the bottom of the box office. I am here, as always, with my panelists Karlyn, Chen.
How's it going?
Trent, Neely.
How's it going, people?
And as a guest on today's podcast, we have got the host of the Gan the Fan podcast and sports blog, and also Marvel fan extraordinaire, Josh Gan.
Josh!
What's up, everybody?
How you doing?
My pleasure to be an honorary Real Underdog today.
Absolutely. So today we are going to be talking about the only movie that came out this last weekend because no other studio was stupid enough to release a movie at the same time as Avengers Endgame. So
Thank you.
This movie might make some money, guys. It might make its budget back.
just a little.
It's a little bit of an underdog, but I think it's somehow going to turn the corner.
I hope it at least makes its marketing budget back.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're going to do something a little different today because if you've been listening to us for a while, you know that our podcast is focused on talking about the lowest grossing movie in theaters, letting you know our opinion, and telling you whether or not it's worth giving it a shot. But if you're listening to this, or if you just like going to the movies in general, odds are you've seen Endgame already. It'll have been out for almost a week by the time that we publish this episode, and so that's plenty of time. We're going to discuss pretty much entirely spoilers for this episode.
Because it's almost impossible to talk about this movie without spoiling it.
Yeah, at least in depth. You can barely scratch the surface unless you dig down deep.
You have been warned.
You have been warned.
You have been warned.
This is it. Get out now, and we'll give you like a little pause here.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the movie and you're one of those people that claims, I don't care about spoilers, neither do I, but trust me, you want to experience this movie knowing as little as possible going in.
Agreed.
It'll be so much better for you. Did any of y'all get it spoiled for you before going to see it?
Nope. I thought I was, because people on campus were being reckless.
Surprisingly, I didn't either, and then you've got the massive leaks that went on Twitter like a week before the movie came out. I kind of want to know what those leaks are now that I have seen the movie.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Were you one of those people who deleted all social media?
I did not delete all social media. I was just careful about where I went.
I knew that Twitter was going to be too tempting. I at least removed the app from my phone for a day or two.
Wow.
Commitment.
I was like, I looked so stupid sometimes. Like, I had lost my headphones, which are noise canceling and would have been really helpful. And when I heard from Trent that, like, be careful, there's Endgame talk all over campus on Friday morning, I walked around like a moron with my ears plugged. Like, I literally, I didn't care. I wasn't getting this movie spoiled for anything.
Yeah, I probably have a little bit of hearing loss because I was cranking my headphones, like, on campus everywhere I went. Like, I was blasting music, and I was like, I hear nothing.
My jaw is dropped. You guys are, what?
And this coming from me, like, I usually, with most movies, I don't care about getting spoiled. I just like watching how a movie gets to its ending and how it's made. But two exceptions are Marvel and Star Wars. If you spoil anything under those franchises for me, you're on my hit list. Like, you're done. But
John's hit list.
Alrighty.
Wow, that sounds like a scary place to be.
It's like -3 people long, so be afraid. But yeah, last warning, spoilers. Here we go.
All right.
So, what do you guys want to talk about first? Like, well, overall, what did you guys think of the movie leaving? Did everybody at least like it?
Yeah, I liked it.
I did.
Okay.
Well, I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it. Like, I like it is a little bit too light.
Yeah, no, I loved it too.
I liked it.
Okay.
I think I'm going to say with like. But also didn't feel like 3 hours, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I could have kept watching.
Yeah.
If they wanted to put other scenes in there, I could have.
Yeah.
But that's just my MCU fanhood coming out.
Yeah, that's probably me too.
Yeah.
I think a natural starting point for me is the performances with this, because generally when I watch a Marvel movie, like, I shout out one or two performances, like just Robert Downey Jr. or just Tom Holland. With this movie, everyone brought their A game to the end game, you could say.
That's good.
Like, I really think everyone, like, from Robert Downey Jr. and I think Chris Evans actually might give their best MCU performances in this, I would argue. But everybody is top-notch. Even Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, the much-maligned Hawkeye, I think he's great in this.
He gets his moments. He finally does.
And the biggest surprise performance-wise for me is Scarlett Johansson does some heavy lifting in some scenes in this that I was like, yes, you go, Scarlett Johansson. So yeah, I think that's a nice place to start is the performances.
Yeah, I do love how, because those two have always been for lack of a better word, kind of the joke characters of the MCU. Because you've got everybody who has some sort of freak superpower or freak technology helping them out. And then you've got them two, they're super strong and super fast, which is still impressive given the fact that they really don't have any sort of genetic or technological modification.
Yeah, but the joke's sort of been the revolving shot in the first Avengers. Everybody's getting their gear up, and then Scarlett Johansson's just cocking a Beretta, and that's her big move.
And Hawkeye's slinging an arrow.
Yeah,
but. Yeah.
I was happy because those are two characters I always wanted to know more about, and they finally got a chance to kind of show us a little bit more of themselves.
Yeah, they got a very satisfying story arc, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Two other performances, I know we've kind of already spread the tarp pretty wide with how many people we're talking about here, but to me the ones that stood out the most were Chris Hemsworth as Thor, and I think you pronounce it Karen Gillan as Nebula. I thought that was the most compelling her character has ever been.
Yeah, easily.
In any of the movies she's been in.
And she's a great actress. I think Nebula's just been extremely underwritten until this movie.
They gave her a lot to do. They gave a lot of people who usually don't have a lot to do a lot to do.
She's shockingly vital to this, which I thought was really nice. Okay, can we talk about actually something on that same vein real quick? What do we think of Thor in this movie?
Fat Thor.
See,
because some people flat out hate this. I loved this.
When I first saw it, I was I was just disappointed. I'm because coming off of Infinity War and Thor Ragnarok, I was wow, this is my new favorite character possibly in the MCU. Then they did that to him, and I was I don't. There were times, we may get more into this later in our discussion, there were times when I thought his character was treated like Drax's character was in the past Guardians movies, where it's just every time he's on screen he gets a joke. And that's all that he really serves as. And I think because of the initial disappointment and some of that stuff, throughout the movie I was just annoyed by it. But after going back thinking about it and hearing a few other perspectives, I think there's an actual story arc there with Thor in this movie alone. Taking away everything else.
I think this is actually perfect with his character arc. Because when you look at his story, he might have the most depressing story in the MCU. He finds out his brother's not really his brother. Almost overthrows his kingdom. Dark World happens, his mom dies. And then, Ragnarok, he loses his whole home planet and most of his people get destroyed by Thanos. And then the fact that he fails to go for the head at the end of Infinity War, the dude's broken by the time we reach Endgame. So one criticism with it, I do kind of agree, is I wish that was actually given more weight than it is instead of just being reduced to jokes. They could have let that sink in a little bit more, but I still overall really enjoyed it. And Chris Hemsworth, I think, is really gifted as a comedic actor, and I think he shines more in that way almost than as a dramatic person. So.
I don't know. I was just a little bit disappointed. I felt like he was going to peak in this movie, and then he just didn't. It was, far from that, which maybe that adds a little bit of humanity to it, where people are just, kind of running right away from their problems, even though they have so much potential. But, I was still a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, and I would say overall I liked it, but I entirely see where you're coming from.
Me too.
And the way that I've kind of justified that in my mind is that he and a lot of the big characters were kind of given their chance to shine in Infinity War. I thought that he was the one who got the biggest fan service and biggest number of screen power moments in Infinity War. Because, you've got him taking on the power of that star to create Stormbreaker, his axe, and almost dying as a result of that. And then he takes the Bifrost down to Wakanda using that axe and just totally lightnings the crap out of half of Thanos' army, and that's one of the best parts of that movie. And I guess I would have liked them, like you guys said, to dig a little more into the humanity of his grief, because he's grieving. He's not only lost every single family member of his, even the ones that he didn't really like that much, including Hela, but he's very much blaming himself for almost blaming himself for the snap, even though he wasn't the one that committed it. He was the one that failed to kill Thanos. And came super close and still didn't manage to do it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you really only get one moment where you kind of acknowledge that he's become what he's become because of his grief. When Banner Hulk, which we'll talk about in a minute, mentions the name of Thanos, and then all of a sudden, and this is one of the better acting moments in the movie, Chris Hemsworth just like goes from being all jovial and in denial and wasted to tears, and it just says, "Don't say that name," and you're just like, "Whoa, dude's broken up."
Yeah.
And so I wish they would have done a little more with that. But I don't know. Maybe it's a little shallow for me to just admire a bold choice, because he doesn't get fit again in the movie. He's fat the whole movie. Even in the final showdown.
I was expecting him to have one shirtless scene of. Just because it's Chris Hemsworth and Thor. So.
Well, and John, I wonder if part of our love for it too also comes from the fact that Robert Downey Jr. makes a Big Lebowski reference to him 2 times.
That made me laugh.
And I was like, oh yes.
Oh, that was great.
But since you mentioned it, and it's the other sort of controversial character choice in the movie, what did we think of Professor Hulk, the merged form of Banner and Hulk?
At first, I was like, that's a little much.
I was thrown.
I was very thrown. I was just like, and I mean, I didn't necessarily think it was implausible, because, I mean, when you think about it, he had 5 years to kind of try to figure out how to control the Hulk in that way. And so if we're talking about could he have done it, I'm like, yeah, he could have done it, probably. Of course, we didn't get to watch how it happened, but I mean, that would have probably been a long, arduous process. I didn't love it at first, and then I learned that it actually was something that happened in the comics. And when you say in the comics, like with Marvel especially, the comics go deep, and there are several different storylines and strands and timelines. It gets all mixed up. So I don't know where in the comics it was.
Yeah, but it has.
But apparently it happened. So that helped me to forgive it a little bit. But I would have liked to see Ruffalo a little more, because I think that when you use motion capture like he did to become Banner Hulk in this movie, you get a little bit of the dulling of facial expression, and vocally he's a really good actor, but facially he's a great actor.
Yeah.
I love Mark Ruffalo as an actor, and so I wish I could have seen him human more.
I will say, though, the merged Hulk gives me one of my favorite moments of the entire film, where they time travel to the Battle of New York, and he has to go find the time stone, and then it's like, pretend to smash a few things while he's there, and so he's just like, and he lazily picks up a car and just throws it down, and he's just like, nah.
That was great.
That was funny. I don't know. I was happy for him, because I was like, you found a balance of your 2 selves that have tortured you for so long. So I was really happy with that.
Because Banner's been afraid of the Hulk, and then when in Thor Ragnarok, where he's been living as the Hulk for a year, you learn that Hulk has his own personality, and he's like, Banner's a puny little idiot. I'm kind of enjoying doing my own thing, and so it's nice to see that arc completed by them coexisting.
That's what I would say. Is I think honestly there was no other place to go for his character.
Yeah.
Other than something like this, because the Hulk, there's only so much you could do with him. He starts out as the Hulk itself, he's just like a savage monster. So combining him with Banner's brain and everything, that seems like the fitting end to his character. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's the end, but the next step.
Yeah. So now that we've done character a little bit, should we do a little bit of a breakdown sort of the plot? I feel like...
I just want to say one more thing, though. Yeah. With the characters, I was... with such an all-star cast and so many people to keep tabs on, I feel like I was never fully happy with, any of the storylines, because we were covering so many bases all at the same time. So that was my one thing with Endgame, but also, really glad that they were able to bring everybody into one movie.
Yeah.
But I do wish they kind of, dug deeper into specific characters.
Yeah. And that especially becomes an issue when in the final 45 minutes of the movie, everybody gets snapped back, which, okay.
We just gotta jump right there.
Before I throw in any criticism based on that, the moment where they all come back and Doctor Strange is bringing them back to New York through the portals, It's one of my favorite moments sitting in a movie ever. I was euphoric.
It took all of my rational brain to not literally stand up in the theater and yell "yeah" and run laps. like Alan Silvestri, like composer, he leans into like the full orchestra there when the rings open, and he just like bong bong, and like all of them come in, and that. I want to save it for later, but there's a moment that happens in that final battle that might be the best fan moment in a comic book movie ever. I think people know where I'm going.
Yeah.
I would have loved to be there opening night. Like, I went on Tuesday,
Me too.
so it had been out for like 5 days. Nobody was saying anything in the theater. I think that would have been like a moment worth seeing.
Nobody even like was that vocal in our theater.
No, I think everyone was. I think everybody was so engrossed in like I want to absorb everything that happens.
Yeah.
They're like I don't want to even waste it with claps. Like
When you go to like a midnight showing or an advanced showing, it's almost required that you make some noise.
Oh, yeah.
But we saw it at 3 p.m. the next Friday, and people were just kind of like, it's too early for this crap. Going off your thing of not being able to invest with some of the characters, a lot of that is because a lot of the characters that got snapped in Infinity War are only in this movie for the last 35-40 minutes. And of course that's what was going to happen, and I honestly appreciate the fact that the unsnap didn't happen until the third act of the movie, instead of like happening earlier as some people might have expected. But it does mean that with all the people that get snapped back, you hear maybe 2 lines a piece from them. Like even some of your favorite characters, you hear like maybe 3 lines from Peter Parker, same from Quill.
They were all amazing, though, I will say.
Oh, yeah.
all Doctor Strange does that entire 45 minutes is he's like, I'm holding some water. That's all I'm gonna do.
Yep. But so you wanted to start digging into plot lines.
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit about plot. So movie opens and like pretty instantly Captain Marvel shows up. She rescues Tony and Nebula from space, brings them down, and they're like, we can find Thanos, this won't be that hard. And sure enough, they're like, hey, we have an energy signature. Stones have been used again. Let's go get them. And then bam, confront Thanos. Thanos is dead within the first 10 minutes of this movie.
I did not see that coming.
I loved that they did that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Not only do I love that they did it, they had to do it, because if they didn't, the audience wouldn't have invested in the rest of the movie, because they would have been like, when's Thanos going to show up? When's the final battle? By killing him, it changed everything. There was one guy in our theater, I don't know if you guys heard, he literally went, what?
Yeah.
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah, no, because you have that massive, like, WTF moment, and then, like, 30 seconds later, you have another one when the screen goes black, and then 5 years later, and you're just like, hang on. Like, 2 things that I don't think anybody saw coming going in. So from that point on, you have to be engaged, because you're just like, they are subverting every single expectation.
Oh, and let me give a shout out to the Marvel marketing team, because 99.9% of the trailer shots are over by the first 15 minutes of the movie. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I literally don't know what's going to happen, because I haven't seen anything of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is how you do this, people. Like, I'm looking
Take
at
notes.
I'm looking at you, DC and Warner Brothers and Sony. Like,
yeah, because I tweeted a kind of a criticism of one of the trailers or TV spots where you see a moment where Cap and Tony say to each other, like, do you trust me? Yeah, I trust you, and shake hands. And I thought that was us seeing their first reconciliation after, 3 years after Civil War happened. And I was like, I wanted to experience that with fresh eyes in the theater. Not only did like half that moment not happen, and it was put in the TV spot completely out of context, but I also was criticizing the trailers for showing too much, quote unquote. But like you said,
it's in the first 10 minutes.
Vast majority of the stuff that happens is in the first act of the movie. And so, yeah, bravo marketing team. I take everything back. Like, y'all did great.
And so what I love. Sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't know. Maybe if we can go back to this thought, if I'm jumping ahead too far, but going back to what you said, wishing you didn't see Captain America and Tony Stark's reunion. I thought the way they executed their reunion, getting back to Earth, like that was one of the best like acting scenes I've seen in the MCU, like in any of the movies. When Robert Downey Jr. is back and he is clearly like he was on the brink of death in space, and he's just losing his mind at the rest of the Avengers, and especially at Captain America.
Yeah, he's just like, you weren't there when I needed you, and that like will cut you deep.
It's a dagger.
Robert Downey Jr., was the highlight of this movie, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, to be
phenomenal.
fair, he steals every MCU movie that he's in, including Spider-Man: Civil War.
Like, not even on purpose, just because
No,
he's,
he
like,
just does.
brilliant.
Yeah,
But
he's
the
amazing.
fact that he steals this, where there's literally every character in the MCU in it, and like so many big things happen, and he still steals it, like that shows you just how great of an actor he is.
And he doesn't steal it just because
It's him.
It's him, and he also doesn't steal it just because they kill him in the end.
No.
Like,
Oh yeah. So
but I don't want to jump there yet. But
no, I want to save that.
Just
We don't
did,
need
John.
to.
Oh, no, I want to
Just
save
did.
that. We will
yeah,
circle
we'll
back
save
to
that. But I'm saying that like all the little moments that he gets that are character building. Some of his best acting moments were you seeing him as a father. I loved seeing him as a
him
dad.
with his daughter. Okay.
The fact that he was a dad is just amazing.
So going back to, like, I love the entire first act of this movie where, like, it's quiet, and I mean that literally. There's almost no score, I don't think, for most of that first act.
Very little.
And it's just Cap trying to, like, survive, and he's running a support group now for people who survived the snap. Interesting, going back to Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow's sort of the only one trying to keep the fight going. Thor's kind of off playing Fortnite with Korg in New Asgard, which that was one of the funniest lines in the movie where he trolls a troll, and he's
Yes.
like, I'm going to summon lightning. But yeah, just the quietness of that first act, and then yeah, when it gets to Tony, and you realize that despite everything that's happened and him being devastated, mainly also with Spider-Man's death, he is genuinely happy with his daughter and Pepper in this like cabin in the woods somewhere. Mm-hmm. And gosh, that kid, so adorable. Like,
Yeah.
I love you 3000. Like, oh yes, she does. And like, ugh.
That was one thing I didn't manage to avoid was Robert Downey Jr. posted to Instagram, I think the Friday of the movie coming out, and it was like all a big thank you. And we all knew that his contract was kind of expiring and he wasn't going to be in the MCU by some way or another.
Yeah.
And one of the hashtags was hashtag 3000. And I'm like, that's going to play into his character some way because that's completely untextualized.
Yeah.
Or uncontextualized. But I did not know where it was going, and I heard his daughter say it, and I'm like, okay.
Dang it.
Yeah.
But seeing his arc from like, that was the moment that caused me to really open up to see who he was in Iron Man. He was cocky, selfish playboy who only cared about himself, literally made killing machines for a living.
Yeah.
And now he's developed to this point where you see him not only just wanting to be a dad, which is something that he talked about at the beginning of Infinity War with Pepper.
Yeah.
But then also being a dad and nailing it. Being a dad that we all want. And
Yeah.
it just was such a great moment of long-term character development.
I felt like also he got to meet his dad or like see his dad again, which was just a nice little like closure on that story that has tortured him for a long time.
Well, let's go ahead and jump on that.
Oh.
So the second act of this movie is Ant-Man because a rat walks across the right switch, which I thought was awesome because like that's totally a fan theory question that somebody would ask on Twitter. Like, what if somebody hit the right switch button? And sure enough, Ant-Man gets spit out of the quantum realm, and they're like, we need to figure out time travel. Side note, everyone's getting on Tony's case for solving time travel in like 5 minutes. And I agree it's funny, but it's so in his character and his intelligence. And also, let's not forget, in Iron Man 2, he made a new element in his basement.
Also, I think it's possible that he's Tony Stark. You can't tell me that there wasn't something always going in the back of his mind for 5 years of how could we possibly fix this.
Exactly.
He was probably already working on this before they came to him.
And so the Avengers are like, okay, we're gonna figure out time travel, and then they realize we can go back in the past and change stuff there because that'll create new problems in the future. And Tony really doesn't want to do that because that might erase his daughter's existence.
Right.
So they're like, we gotta just go find the stones and undo the snap. So naturally, this leads to them having to find the stones in previous MCU films, which,
Brilliant.
like, this is one of the most comic booky things to ever happen in a movie, and that's why I love it.
This is the closest I've ever seen a comic book movie get to comic book levels of complexity.
Yeah.
Because I don't read comics, but part of the reason I don't read comics is because I feel like I'm too old to start because of how complex they are. Not because they're juvenile in any way. I think comic storytelling is some of the most advanced and really fantastically done out there. I mean, it gave us these movies.
Yeah.
But there is so much deep digging that goes into it. You kind of don't know where to start when you're, 22. and have never read a full comic book in your life.
Yeah.
But I know that they can really dig deep into whether it's multiple universes, multiple strands of time, going back in time to fix the present, yada, yada, yada. They do that kind of thing all the time, and different people taking on different superhero identities, which this movie also digs into. And I loved that this was kind of a turning point in the deep, dark comic book nerd culture, because it's finally cool to put it on screen in all of its big, complex nerdiness.
Yep.
And that's awesome.
Like, and I love the way this movie, like, says that, like, yeah, time travel doesn't make sense. That's why we're not trying to change that much with time. We're just trying to undo the snap. Like, they're trying to keep it actually as simple as possible for themselves and the audience.
I feel like they also explained it pretty well. When Banner and...
The Ancient One.
Yes, thank you. I was like, I don't know what she's called. The Ancient One. Like, have a conversation, and she kind of visualizes it. And that just... Visual learner over here. Like, awesome. Thank you. Now I get it.
Because basically what they're saying is they're not trying to undo Thanos snapping. They're saying we're trying to undo the snap, and then we're going to put the stones back. So everything that happens in Infinity War will still happen. Everything terrible will still suck. But, like, the people who were gone will come back. Gosh, like, when they go to the Battle of New York, and Steve Rogers gets in an elevator... And the Russo brothers are so genius because they use the same camera angles and editing, I'm pretty dang sure, as that elevator fight scene in Winter Soldier to make you think they're going to repeat it. And then Captain America just leans over. It shows how much he's grown and he goes, "Hail Hydra." And then you just see him leave with Loki's spear. And it's like, yes, he's learned so much.
Oh my gosh.
And also, I think they do a great job of Captain America fights himself, his 2012 self in this.
That was awesome.
It's a great way to show that he's matured because, like, 2012 Captain America, he's, like, kind of the square guy. And he's like, I think I've run into, like, a Loki imposter hologram. And then he's like, I can do this all day, imposter. And then our Cap's like, yeah, I know. Like, I get your thing. And then, like, I love that he ends the fight by saying, Bucky's alive. And he knows that that's going to throw him off so that he can just punch him in the face and knock him out.
Yeah, no. And also seamless effects during that scene where just, you were just like, oh, that's just two Chris Evanses fighting. That's just,
I
totally
didn't even
normal.
think about that, so...
Because he would have to shoot both sides of that.
Yeah, and I mean, at one point you see both of their faces when one of them is kind of in a headlock with the other.
Yeah.
And you're just like, it doesn't occur to you, oh, that's a body double with Chris Evans's face CGI'd onto it.
Yeah.
That's just two Chris Evans people.
Also, shout out that they were able to get the people to cameo in this that they were, because they get the Ancient One, Tilda Swinton, to come back, and then they get Robert Redford to play the Secretary of S.H.I.E.L.D. once again in the lobby for a 2-minute scene. Robert Redford, guys. Like, that's... Gosh.
Like, who gets Robert Redford to do a 2-minute cameo in anything? Nobody.
But when you're Marvel and you've made the money that you have and have the sway that you do, you can.
In the words of Black Widow, I'll persuade you.
Yeah. Yes, John.
Yeah, but getting to re-see some scenes from the Avengers from another angle, because the Avengers is, like, tied with a couple other movies for my favorite MCU movie, and kind of getting to get thrown back to that. I watch the Avengers probably 2 or 3 times a year just because of how much I love it and how rewatchable I find it. But, like, even still getting thrown back and getting to see what happens after they corner Loki at the top of Stark Tower, and I was just like, yes! It was so much yes during that whole time travel sequence.
Would they make Hulk walk down the stairs?
And he's like, stairs, Hulk hates stairs.
That was genius.
That was so great.
And then it also sets up because of that, Hulk bursts out, knocks Tony on his back. He loses the Tesseract. Loki takes the Tesseract and creates a branched reality, which does set up the Disney Plus show that Tom Hiddleston's going to be doing of Loki.
I'm glad you're onto that theory too.
Time hopping through history and influencing world events.
It hasn't been solidly established that that's what the Loki show is about, right? But I would predict that it probably.
Yeah.
It hasn't been confirmed,
cool.
but everyone thinks
when
that's
I saw
what's
that, when I saw that happen, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Like that's how you set up a Loki show. If he's dead, like this is a perfect way to
brilliant,
do it.
And that way he stays dead. So but he's not dead. Like and it gets a little
enough for a show.
Yeah.
Now
Also-
I don't know how the WandaVision show is going to happen because Vision's gone.
Yeah, he's toast.
I think rewatching Infinity War, Shuri did enough Vision configurating that if she wants to, she could maybe rebuild him.
Oh, right. That's right.
Anyway,
Definitely.
so here's the thing: do we believe that because at a certain point they're like, we're running out of Pym particles to do these time jumps, or we're gonna like so they're like, we have to go find the Tesseract in another point in time because Loki took it. They're like, well, we only have enough for like one jump. And they're like, well, hey, Hank Pym and the Pym particles are gonna be where the Tesseract is at this one point in 1970. I don't know if I believe. I'm like, couldn't they have gone to Hank Pym's lab in 2023 and there would have been Pym particles? Like, I don't know if I believe per se that they only had what they had.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was like, can you not find more?
However, that 1970 scene gives us one of the great moments where he talks to his dad. Tony talks to him, which is great because, honestly, Robert Downey Jr.'s arc as Iron Man has arguably been complete since Iron Man 3. The only thing that's really been left is his fear of what's coming from space, which turns out to be Thanos, and then his unresolved father issues. And both of those get resolved in this movie because the snap happened and he has to learn to live with that. And then by talking with his dad, he realizes his dad really did love him and did the best he could as a father, which I thought was really poignant. And both of them do great acting in that scene.
Yeah,
they do. I think, part of the thing that you just have to live with in these movies is the small, like, convenience things.
Yeah, of course.
And they're all nitpicks, but they all pay off so well. You know, like, I'll live with them conveniently finding the Tesseract and the Pym particles in the same space to give us that, not only the moment with Tony and his dad, but I love the moment when Cap walks into Peggy's office and realizes it's her. And is just staring, like, that was one of the hardest hitting moments for me in the whole movie. I think.
Good foreshadowing too.
Exactly.
Which we won't get into that yet either.
No.
Well, that was predictable, though. I was going to say.
Yeah, I wish, because in fact,
they were going to end up together.
Yeah, there's one thing where this movie foreshadows it a bit too hard, where like at the support group at the beginning, Captain America says something like, "I missed a dance that I could have like gone back to," and I was like, "Oh no," and so we're just. Oh, and then the movie from there kind of goes to my most surprising moment for me, which is Black Widow and Hawkeye on Vormir to get the Soul Stone. This might be one of the most underrated, but yet my favorite scenes in this movie.
See, I saw the premise of that part of the movie coming because as soon as they were the team that went to space in 2014 said, okay, you're going here, and they said, Hawkeye, Black Widow, you're going to Vormir to get the Soul Stone. I'm just like sitting back going, you guys know what that means, right? Like, you know.
I don't think they did.
I don't think they did.
They don't know exactly what it means.
I guess they didn't, but I was kind of thinking in my head, almost in silent communication to the people around me, like, is anybody else catching this? Like, anybody else know what's going to have to happen here? And I was like, so I saw that coming, but I loved the way that they executed it.
Me too.
But it sounds like you guys have some thoughts on
because both of them feel that they should be the one to go over.
I don't think we're talking about the same people right now.
Because Jeremy Renner, like the cold open for this movie is his family getting dusted, which is a great new way to see the snap because he has no idea what's happening because he wasn't part of the fight.
Right.
And so he spends his free time now exacting vigilante awesomeness on criminals because he doesn't think they deserve to have survived the snap. And so he thinks, I'm too bad to be redeemed, like, I should be the one to go over, and then Black Widow's like, no, like, all that matters to me is, like, the Avengers are my family, like, if I can do something to bring you all back, like, that's worth it. Yeah. And so it's done so well, because, like, she, like, shocks Jeremy Renner, and you're like, oh, she's going over, that's sad, and then, like, he gets up and, like, uses an arrow to blow her to the side, and he jumps over, and you're like, oh, he's definitely there, he's airborne. She catches him and, like, grapples him to the rock, and, like, forces him, basically, to be like, you gotta let me go. And he has to eventually.
I read a part of an interview with the writers, Marcus and McFeely, that in an early script they wrote Hawkeye to be the one that goes over the edge, and that I guess they passed the script around to a bunch of, the rest of the staff, and one of I think the leader of like the VFX team for the movie was like basically came back to them and was like, don't take this away from Black Widow's character, because it's like you start the movie out with her so desperately wanting to fix everything, and she's like the only one really that's still committed to the fight, and so it just makes perfect sense that she's the one that has to make the sacrifice to feel completed.
I think it's perfect that in the Avengers we learn that the whole reason she's doing the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff is that because she was an assassin in her past life. Like, she's like, I've spilled so much blood, I'm trying to do the right thing. So I think it's so poetic that she dies to resurrect literally half of all life in the universe.
And it even goes back to the first Avengers. I watched that recently before watching Endgame, and there's a scene in the first Avengers where she's talking to Loki when Loki's imprisoned on the big helicarrier, and Loki's basically like telling her that what she's doing isn't going to make up for all the wrong that she's done.
Yeah.
She says she's got a lot of red in her ledger. It won't make up for all of the wrong she's done in her past. And it's like, it's that same thread that carries through all the way until this moment. And it's like so satisfying that...
And that's what makes this movie great, is the payoff to small moments. And like that moment, that conversation from 2012, I don't think anybody thought was going to be paid off in this movie. And it is, if you're paying attention.
I just appreciate this movie is satisfying. Like, we've been saying that a lot, but like a lot of the character arcs that were just left untied, like they were tied at the end.
Yeah.
Like everything was resolved, which was awesome.
Yeah, even the ones that, even with characters that have movies coming later, which I'm excited for still, but I think I heard somebody, I think it was Jeremy Johns on YouTube, said, if for some reason this was the end of the MCU, this was the last MCU movie to ever be made ever, I'd be okay with it.
Me too.
I agree with that sentiment.
Me too.
I'd be perfectly
Like I will happily watch Far From Home this July.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If you had told me that this was it, and I just have to live off my memories and like rewatching this stuff on Blu-ray and digital, I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, no, I mean, this series already has more movies in it than almost any other series, save for like James Bond.
But that's kind of cheating.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was very just happy with the kind of resolve. And a lot of that has to do with, obviously, some fan service. But like when you've got all these people that have been following this series for 22 movies over the span of 11 years, you got to serve your fans.
Yeah.
And they do that so well here while not feeling forced or cheesy for most of it.
I agree.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, let's think about some of the kind of character wrap-ups that we get. So I think the first big one that we mentioned earlier, and it's probably the biggest one, is Iron Man. I mean, he's not the only major character that meets his end in this movie, but he's the biggest deal of a major character that meets his end in this movie.
So basically, just to quickly fast forward, like second act happens, they are able to undo the snap, but the problem is, like present day Nebula's mind link or memory system is linking up with her past self. So 2014 Nebula, along with 2014 Thanos, starts to realize what's going on. So 2014 Nebula takes her place and brings Thanos to the lab. And then he decides to try to take the gauntlet back. And then the epic battle happens, which might be the best final battle ever in cinema. I think the only thing that still might stand that test is like the Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings, but it's close. And then and so then it comes down to Doctor Strange just tells Tony, "There's one way for this," and so you see Thanos. He's like, "I'm gonna snap again. I'm inevitable," and he snaps. Nothing happens, and then Tony reveals stones are in his arm, and then he just says, "Well, I'm Iron Man," and then boom, the words that basically started the MCU at the end of Iron Man 1
cap it off,
finish his arc and finish it off. It's so dang poetic. Like, I'm not gonna say I cried, but I felt something inside that was not positive. And gosh, I just love the way they handle his death too, because Pepper comes up to him and she's just like, "You can rest now." Like, she's not
okay. Yeah, okay, that I was like, "Are you not sad?" Like, why? She's just like, "We'll be okay. You can."
Well, she's not gonna make him feel bad in his dying moments.
Well, yeah,
She breaks down
like,
when
like,
the heart monitor thing.
Yeah, like
just,
the thing
when
goes
the
out
light
and then
goes
she
out,
starts
she
sobbing.
breaks down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
As did we all.
I wish she was a little bit more present in the movie. Also, I did not know that she became a superhero.
Well, she got to
makes
use
sense,
suits a
but-
little bit in Iron Man 3.
That's right.
Which I
Right.
totally forgot about until somebody reminded me.
Well, I think it's also fair to assume that, because there's that line where his daughter's wearing a helmet, like, when we first meet him and the daughter, and he says, "That's an anniversary present I'm making for Mom." So I think it's fair to say that because they live in sort of this post-apocalyptic world now, she might be actually training with the equipment, so she's not as maybe incompetent as some might think. Because on first look, I was like, should she know how to do all the stuff in the suit she's doing?
Yeah, maybe knowing what Tony was going off to do, she was probably like, yeah, some stuff might hit the fan. I might need to learn how to protect myself just in case. But I thought that her and Tony's last moments were kind of kind of a strength moment for her character, just because, I mean, like, you have to be super strong to look the person you love in the face, knowing that they're about to die and leave behind a 5-year-old kid or 4-year-old kid or whatever, and keep your composure.
Yeah.
And like, I thought that was great acting on her part, great acting on everybody's part.
Tom Holland comes back and does a basically reverse of his Infinity War death.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, it's so sad because, like, he views him as a father figure. And he's like, no, we did it. Like, we won. Like, you only need to, like, survive just to literally live. You don't need to fight anybody anymore. You just need to live. And he, like, but, like, he can't do... gosh, like, I'm getting choked up talking about it. Like, it's so good.
Honestly, his reaction to Tony Stark dying hit me harder than I think anyone else's.
Yeah.
Just because you see the connection there. And coming back from Tony watching his death in Infinity War.
Yeah. It's such a good
Definitely makes it hit harder. Also, the scene in the fight when Tony just hugs him.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I love that.
Spider-Man's
He was just, like,
doing
freaking
something
out.
like-
We were just in space. Oh, my gosh.
he was like, we were in space, and
Tony's
like, I
just
didn't
like-
exist, and then Tony's like, shut up, kid. Like, I just want to hug you right now. Like,
Yeah.
And then he's like, this is nice.
I am curious to find out what the experience of the vanished people was. Like, in those 5 years that they were gone, what did they see? How did they experience? Because Peter kind of started to explain it, and then, like you guys said, Tony just smothered him in a hug and was just like, shut up, I just want to hug you. But I'm curious.
I assumed that there was no experience.
yeah, I think
Just
they
went from...
it went,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it seemed very immediate, because he was like, oh, like, we're here, and then they said that you needed help, and so then
Yeah.
Doctor Strange started doing his little, like, light thingy, and here we are.
Yeah, because Spider-Man's like, yeah, I turned to dust. Remember that? Like, remember how weird that was? But then I woke up, and then, like, Doc was there, and he was like, you need help. And so we went through the portal, and here we are, and we're fighting now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that he activates instant kill, which is a running joke in Homecoming.
Yeah.
He's like, Karen, what's with you and the instant kill? And he activates it, and it's just literally, like, the iron legs just stabbing everything in their path.
And it's awesome.
It is.
It's so great.
Also, back to the hug. I didn't think to mention this last time, but it, like, closes it, like, and when Homecoming opens,
Yes.
Iron Man reaches for the door and goes, this isn't a hug.
Yeah, he's like, this isn't a hug, we're not there yet. And then they're there, and
then
Endgame.
they're there.
Aww.
And that kind of brings up what I think is a really cool recurring theme in both this and Infinity War is a parent-child relationship, because you see it in several places. You see kind of the way to do it and the way not to do it between, Tony and Peter. And obviously he's not Peter's legitimate father, but is very much viewed by Peter as a father figure. And I think it kind of gets across the importance of having that kind of relationship in a young man's life, or especially just because, you have Tony who never really got to have his father in the way that he should have. I think his father died when he was like in his early 20s, as explained in Civil War. And then you see how important that closure is going back in time to 1970 for Tony, for him really becoming who he is and overcoming his fears and being guided through uncertainties, kind of showing that that's what a parent is supposed to be there for. And I loved how kind of in those final moments you get that kind of completed relationship between him and Peter, who also is without a father or a mother.
Yeah.
Or even an uncle. You never really learn about what happens to Uncle Ben in the MCU, but you kind of hear it lightly referred to in Homecoming, like, I don't want to be so hard on Aunt May because of all that's happened to her recently, and you just kind of think, oh, that's because of Uncle Ben, but we don't get to see that.
Yeah.
And so completing that dynamic I thought was really beautiful. Also getting to see how even maybe him feeling like he failed Peter in not being able to save him from the snap maybe motivated him to be as good of a father to Morgan as he was.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's definitely there.
Yeah, because I think he definitely did think of Peter as kind of a surrogate child. In a way.
Absolutely.
Even though he in his demeanor wouldn't admit it, because, I mean, he's slightly cocky Tony Stark.
I mean, one of the first things he says to the cat when he lands back on Earth is, I lost the kid. Like, that's like the first thing he says. It's not like, I didn't beat Thanos or we didn't save the world. It was, I lost the kid. Like, that's what's weighing on him the most.
Yeah, that killed me.
Speaking of which, before we go too much into the Theos, forgot, like, we need to mention, like, Cap picks up the hammer in this movie.
That was my biggest issue in this whole entire thing. Like,
Whoa.
what?
Okay, let her talk.
He's not supposed to be able to do that.
They established in Age of Ultron that he probably maybe could.
Yeah, when he maybe moved it a quarter inch when he tried to pick it up.
Hey,
But that's it.
if he be worthy, let him possess the power of Thor. Captain America is
what
worthy.
made him worthy now versus before?
I do have an issue with that.
And then also him compared to Thor, in worthiness, character-wise, or
I
what?
think, I think he's always been more moral than Thor.
Yeah,
He's always been more
He's
selfless.
always been worthy. So why does he all of a sudden get to pick it up? I'm heated about this subject.
That does bother me. That why now? But at the same time, it's so awesome. I kind of don't care.
That was just
That's an excuse. That's a cop-out.
Yeah,
it's a total excuse, but it was so this movie was made for the fans. There's I know it could still
I'm a
be.
fan.
But okay, you're right. My bad.
Yeah,
sorry to I wasn't trying to start
feel
it
attacked.
off.
What Josh is really saying is that you're not a real fan.
No. I'm just saying it makes it makes those moments to please the crowd.
Yeah.
It probably I predicted that was going to happen heading into the movie.
Yeah.
That was
Really?
my one prediction.
That was actually one of the bold predictions of the movie.
But
Because
then,
they teased
but then
it.
does he also get to control lightning now because he has?
That is a little bit more confusing.
Because that was weird too.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, it's all a stretch. That was the biggest stretch of that scenario.
It's we don't need Thor anymore. We just have Captain America.
A mutual friend of ours did point out to me, he said that the thing that Odin puts on the hammer is if he's worthy, let him possess the full power of Thor, not just let him wield a hammer. It's the full power of Thor, which would include the lightning. So that actually
is it the full power of Thor
Yeah,
or the
it's-
full power of the hammer?
No, it's let him possess the power of Thor, which would include lightning.
Interesting.
Sure.
Anyway.
I haven't dug that deep with it.
Nah, me
I just
neither.
kind of like you said, there's the same thing with some plot conveniences, of which there are plenty in this movie, of which there have been plenty in a lot of the MCU.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you're dealing with these stories this is fantasy. It's like sci-fi fantasy. That's what we're dealing with. You're going to get plot conveniences. You're going to get Deus Ex Captain Marvels. You're going to get
Captain Marvel.
all that stuff.
Yeah, what did she do in this movie? I'm just wondering.
She literally did come in to destroy the Chitauri ship, in the last 15, 20 minutes of the movie.
I was kind of expecting her to get the stones.
Yeah,
I feel like her energy could have.
Because, remember, when Kevin Feige and, the Russos, everybody was talking, they're like, we were going to introduce her in Infinity War, but we wanted to give her a full introduction in Captain Marvel so that you knew to understand her role in Endgame. My sister didn't see Captain Marvel. She's like, I had no problem understanding her role in Endgame because it's quick.
Yeah, but that also Endgame is not the kind of movie that you want to introduce a whole new character in who's going to have their own franchise built around them. So I understand that. But definitely, I'm not sure whether or not I really truly predicted if Captain Marvel was going to be really, really responsible for Thanos' defeat in the end. And ultimately she wasn't. And I'm glad because that wouldn't have been earned at all.
Although she does give me one of my favorite moments in the entire movie where she's fighting Thanos. He headbutts her. It does nothing. She smiles. And so Thanos is like, all right, screw it. And he just reaches a power stone out of the gauntlet and punches her directly with it. I was like, oh, yes. All the comic bookness is coming out.
Yeah.
And then Josh Brolin actually gave me one of my belly laughs in this movie where, Scarlet Witch shows up and she starts tearing him to pieces and she's like, you took everything from me. And he's like, I don't even know you. Because it's the 2014 Thanos.
Right.
He doesn't know her. And she's like, you will. And, I was like, yes.
I know that he was in not really that much of this movie and he really had all of his moments in Infinity War. But freaking Josh Brolin is so perfect.
He's so good as Thanos.
Thanos is such a good villain. I can't believe how much they managed to humanize him and still make you hate his guts.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Because, when you've got somebody like that who literally has genocide of trillions on their minds, it is very hard to get anybody to see them any other way than psychopathic and unrelatable. But you get into his psyche a lot in Infinity War into such a way that you kind of see where he's coming from. You don't agree with it, hopefully, otherwise check yourself. But you kind of see where he's coming from and why he would convince himself of what he believes.
Absolutely.
I do kind of like how you see within the first, after the 5 years later thing, you see immediately that Thanos was wrong about the snap helping Galactic whatever civilization, because Earth is in shambles, and how could it not be? So many people who were either in positions of political power, or even from the people who help produce and farm food or whatever. You're losing half of the world's industry and diplomacy.
Yeah.
Things are going to go to crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you kind of realize instantly, but it's never really told straight to you that, yeah, this ideology is whack. There's no excuse for it.
Yeah. I also, sorry, but the knowing that this movie was 3 hours long and we packed in so much character development into this movie, it made me wish that they had even, because I've heard interviews where they had to cut a lot of stuff out that was like Thanos' background out of Infinity War to condense the movie into to keep it watchable for viewers. I enjoyed Endgame. I didn't feel like it dragged out or anything, so I almost wish they would have kept those scenes in Infinity War to even give his character more of a backstory. Not that I felt like his backstory was underdeveloped, but just out of general intrigue to know how did he become this way.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see Josh Brolin as Thanos again, but in prequel set stuff, because I know Marvel's trying to do the Eternals, which I think Thanos either is or he's part of the family line that is part of the Eternals.
Ooh.
So
his father, I think, is because they reference him in Infinity War.
Yeah, when he goes to the Soul Stone.
Oh,
I can't imagine that Marvel would go through the energy of hiring somebody as great as Josh Brolin and then dumping that away after 2 movies. There's just no way in my brain that makes sense.
Right, yeah. It was kind of funny seeing the evolution, because, like I said, I watched Avengers fairly recently, the original, before going to see this, and kind of seeing the evolution of his character design, because you see him for 3 seconds in the mid-credits scene of the original Avengers, and he's really cartoony looking. He looks really kind of goofy. And then they altered him enough to this movie where, I mean, it's a few simple things as his mouth is a little smaller, his nose is a little smaller, but they made him super intimidating. Yeah. And with just a few little tweaks, and his character design is great. The CGI that they use on him is great. Some of the other CGI in the movie is but they had to use a lot of what they had on Thanos, which I think was the proper division of labor, if you will. Let's talk about Cap's ending real quick.
Yeah.
So that opens up. I liked it. I liked it.
Yeah.
It opens up.
Predictable. Yeah.
Oh, it's totally predictable.
But it was predictable in the way, if it, that's one of the things where I predicted it, and I was but I don't want it to be anything else.
Exactly.
Right. That was, the thing that most people that I know anticipated, and by saying most people that I know, I also mean listening to people on podcasts, reading articles, yada yada. People were saying Captain America is going to die. Yep. Tony Stark might also die, fine, but if anybody dies in this movie, if one person, it's going to be Cap.
I said the same thing.
And I could kind of see that, because you have him as technically the oldest character on the squad, and it's just kind of it's time for him to retire.
It's too selfless.
Yeah, he's exactly. You think about him jumping on a dummy grenade in the first movie, and you're just he's gonna go that way. He's gonna sacrifice himself. And then also at the beginning of the movie, you kind of get your expectations subverted, because Tony has a family, and at least in the back of my mind, I said, okay, he's safe. He's surviving this movie because he has this family, this 4-year-old daughter to take care of. They can't kill him. That's too heartless. And then they pulled an old freaking switcheroo on me and switched that around. And obviously Tony gives his own life, and Cap gets to kind of get the girl.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this, but just yesterday, the Russo brothers said, because I was wondering, I'm but wait, if Cap goes back and lives with Peggy, that changes everything that we've seen in the MCU. But they said, they're actually, he's smarter than that. He jumped to another dimension and lived with Peggy in that dimension and lived a life with her, and then jumped back to our dimension as an old man. So that proving,
another timeline?
Yeah, another timeline, a branch timeline, they were talking about with the ancient one. Because he's and that makes sense for his selflessness too, because you remember in Winter Soldier.
How does he know how to do that? That is not his.
Anyway, well, maybe they'll explore it in another movie or a TV show. Because I know Marvel's doing the What If series, where it's what if this happened instead? But cool. I think that also ties in with his selflessness, because if you remember in Winter Soldier, Peggy lived a normal life. She got married and had kids. I don't think Steve would be the guy that's I'm going to take that future away from her, versus I'm just going to go to another dimension and live with her that way.
I forgot that in the Winter Soldier they established that, because at the end of Endgame, my prediction was that he went back in time, stayed in their timeline, and kind of married and was with Peggy on the DL. Like, was kind of like, we got to keep this the world's best kept secret because other me, young me, is out there kicking butt, and you have to even not tell him so that all this stuff can still transpire. And then, like, he's just kind of married to her and doesn't really leave the house. And which, I mean, would be sad, but I mean, in the name of love, it's necessary. All things are possible. But given that, like, that kind of does dispel my belief in that. Also, the fact that he and Peggy's great niece made out at the end of Civil War.
Yeah,
I thought the same thing.
If she had the knowledge that, my great uncle is the real Captain America in 2 timelines, and I just need to make sure not to tell him, like, that'd be effed up. Like, that would not be okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm starting to think that my theory is a little whack.
Also, I don't know if Cap could make it that long. 2023, after jumping back into, let's say, the 50s or something like.
Hey, Super Soldier.
I guess you're right. Yeah, what am I saying? Yeah, he can do whatever.
Yeah, but
he
also
aged a bit.
Yeah, I'm still very curious / confused as to how he did get back to that moment in time.
I am too.
Mm-hmm.
But see, the thing is, with these kind of movies, some people will get bothered by the fact that some things go unexplained. And it's kind of like we had with a very different movie earlier this year, but Us. You get a lot of crap not explained to you in that movie. But the thing is, it's not explained, but it also is not a movie that really contradicts itself in too many ways, if any. This movie doesn't set up really too many ways that it'll contradict itself. But there are some things left unexplained that I'm fine with.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
Like, if you completely negate some rule that you establish early on in the movie, later on, I'll get pissed by that.
Yeah.
But with the open-endedness of some of the questions that you get in this movie, I could care less. Like, a movie doesn't owe me an explanation for every single little bit. Otherwise, you'd be sitting in the theater for hours.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just really happy with where these characters ended up, however they ended up there, personally.
But so that does lead to him giving the shield to Sam Wilson.
Yeah.
Yes!
I'm glad it was Sam.
I'm glad it was Sam.
Because both Sam and Bucky in the comics do stints as Captain America, right? But, I mean, it kind of makes sense that it would be Sam. Well, for one, he doesn't have a egregious criminal record. Like, I mean, even though he was brainwashed, Bucky went around killing fools for years, like crazy. And no matter what kind of political pardon he might have gained after doing that, the public's going to be a little sus about it and be like, if he's really as susceptible to becoming a Hydra assassin as he was in the past, do we really want this guy being Captain America? So that made sense.
Yeah.
I mean, Captain America stands for morals and values, really, so you kind of want someone who's in the same boat.
Yeah.
Whose morals and values haven't been compromised in such a really awful way. But
And it allows there to always be like a Cap and Bucky like this. I don't know. I kind of found that.
I found it kind of like Dark Knight Rises, where it's like Batman's not just a person; it's an idea, and it can be passed down.
Yeah.
That was cool. And then just for Tony Stark's funeral, there's like a panning shot of everybody grouped in their franchises, and it's kind of a meta moment, but I loved it because it shows what Robert Downey Jr. started for modern entertainment and storytelling. And what I really love is that my main man, Happy Hogan, a.k.a. Jon Favreau, is like the third in line, because everybody loves to shout out Robert Downey Jr. and Kevin Feige and the Russos, and everybody else is all they should. But Jon Favreau directed the first Iron Man people. He started this off.
Yeah.
And actually, he gave me, like, my biggest almost cry moment where, like, he's talking to the daughter at the end, and he's like, you good? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, I kind of want cheeseburgers, though. And he's like, your dad liked cheeseburgers, which is a callback to Iron Man 1, where he gets off the plane from the Middle East, and he's like, I want an American cheeseburger and a press conference. Cheeseburger first. But so Happy's just like, I'll give you all the cheeseburgers you want. I was like, oh!
That was great. Again...
Okay, I didn't match that up. That's where it came from.
I didn't catch that until way later. Again, a lot of the kind of connections I had to have explained to me, because I haven't seen Iron Man. I love it. I haven't seen that in probably 5 or 6 years. It's been a while.
It's probably been 3 or 4 for me.
But it's also a testament to how much of that movie is so memorable, because I remember a lot of it, and I remember there was something about cheeseburgers in that movie, but I can't put my finger on it.
It was before that press conference where he's like, "We're not doing weapons anymore."
Yep.
Heck, even the kid from Iron Man 3 shows up at the funeral at the way back.
I've heard mixed opinions about that. I loved that.
I loved it.
I thought it was super touching, and also whatever little character development happened in Iron Man 3, a lot of it was on his relationship with that kid.
Yep.
And so that was really cool. And it takes you a little bit to recognize him because he's, I think in real life, Ty Simpkins is 17 or 18 now.
Yeah, and he was like 9 when that happened. So
yeah.
Kids look different from when they're 17 and 9, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I loved that. I loved the funeral scene because it didn't feel too drippy. It wasn't everybody just sobbing like, "Oh, Tony." It was silent. There was so little talking.
No, it's just everybody. It's a meta moment. Everybody's sort of saying thank you, Robert Downey Jr. almost for launching this for us, and we're gonna try our best to carry the torch.
Yeah, we haven't talked.
And then Nick Fury pops up out of nowhere for the first time at the funeral.
Yeah,
that's on par for Nick Fury though.
Oh, for sure. We haven't talked a whole ton about like the film craft of this movie, which I don't really think we need to. This is much more of a movie where what dominates is the characters and the story easily. Mm-hmm. But I loved 2 particular shots in this movie a lot. One of them was the shot of the funeral when you're going down the line of all of the people who are visiting Tony and paying their last respects. One unbroken shot for what feels like a good 2 minutes, going from the end of the dock from Pepper and their daughter all the way back to Nick Fury and Agent
Hill.
Agent Hill, thank you, Kobe Smulders.
Yeah.
And that was just like, it didn't feel dragged. It felt perfect, and I really just loved getting to really envelop all those characters saying their final goodbyes and taking the time to do that. Loved it. And then also the shot that opens with the shot that introduces Hawkeye's Ronin persona after the 5 years later in Tokyo is one unbroken shot following him kind of around an alley as he's killing a bunch of gangsters in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Until he comes up on this one guy and slices his throat, and then the shot breaks.
Yep.
And if you've seen like the other MCU movies that the Russos have directed, especially the Captain America movies, one-shot action scenes aren't really their thing.
No.
The only places we've really seen that in the MCU are really just Black Panther and a couple other places.
Yeah. I think there's one in Iron Man 3 for like a couple seconds, but it's brief.
Yeah, but so I thought that was really well constructed, and also just a symbol to me that, they want to do great stuff with these characters. They wanted to write and act a great film. But they directed and shot and audio produced a fantastic film.
They really did.
They did not skimp on filmmaking quality.
Yeah, I was talking to my sister and her fiance, and he said, this is the movie I think the Russo brothers wanted to make from the day they signed on to the MCU.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when they were making Winter Soldier and doing that elevator fight, they wanted to build to this, I think, was the end goal.
That's one of those Hollywood stories that kind of makes me emotional, because you think when they were starting off directing television comedy, they directed episodes of Community and Arrested Development together. Yeah. And like, if they were to go back in time to those versions of themselves and be like, hey, you are going to direct what is probably going to be the highest grossing movie ever made, if not like the top 3, like how cool that would have been.
You might say they're real underdogs.
Yes, Josh.
That was good.
And it's all full circle. So this is going to be the last episode of our podcast
ever.
I want to end on...
This is our end game.
All right.
Joe's like, just kidding. I can't say that.
No, yeah. But yeah, for real. I mean, and the MCU has done that a lot. They've taken kind of indie or television directors and given them a shot at the big time. Like, you had Taika Waititi direct Thor Ragnarok, which turned out really well. You had...
Heck, Jon Favreau before... Like, Elf was his biggest studio film, I'm pretty sure, before he did Iron Man 1.
Yeah. Wow. And then also Shane Black, who was better known as a screenwriter because he wrote Lethal Weapon, but then also directed really good movies like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys.
Yeah.
And then they gave him Iron Man 3. He did a really good job with that. As good as he could have done, I think. That wasn't...
I like that movie more than most.
Yeah, I like it. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad by any means.
No.
But let him kind of play his part and do his thing with the characters, and I think he did a good job. And then also, I can not remember their names, but the two directors of Captain Marvel, the only movies that I know of that they had previously directed were Half Nelson, which was an early Ryan Gosling movie, and then a movie called It's Kind of a Funny Story, which came out 7 or 8 years ago.
I'm going to look them up real quick, so if you want to talk for a second, I can.
Yeah, no, it's all good. But I really think, all the things that, I think all the positive that has come from the MCU in terms of elevating careers of actors and directors kind of was represented in this movie, because you also had a lot of actors who were really small names until the MCU brought them along, especially a lot of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Chris Pratt, was really just known for
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec and some very minor roles in like Zero Dark 30 and Moneyball. Pom Clementif, who plays Mantis, never had heard of her before.
Dave Bautista was a wrestler.
And is awesome as Drax. I think they just really have done a lot of good to a lot of really talented people.
Yeah, Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck are the directors of Captain Marvel.
That's right. I'm excited to see what comes of it next. Ryan Coogler also. How could I forget to mention him, the guy who directed Creed?
I'm about to say Creed was the biggest thing that he did until then, but even that was kind of different, because it was sort of like, can he resurrect this franchise that's sort of been in hibernation for a couple of years?
Mm-hmm. And he made, what a lot of people think is the best Rocky movie since the first Rocky. So,
I think I subscribe to said opinion.
Yeah. So overall, we are all very... I'd say we're all very emotionally connected to this franchise. Yeah. I know that Karlyn and I haven't seen every single MCU movie. I
have seen all of them.
You've seen Thor 2 now?
I've seen all of them.
Oh, okay.
Which, by the way, I love that the MCU in their Endgame was able to connect arguably their worst movie to the bigger picture. It's like
they spent a while in Thor: The Dark World. They spent 10 minutes there. I'm like, dang, they're committing to remembering this movie existed.
Yeah, I heard it. Kevin Smith was talking about it, and he said, "What, you didn't like Thor: The Dark World? Screw you! We're making you watch The Dark World again." But they made it work.
They did,
and so this was a very, I think, very satisfying movie for all of us, and. Even despite some potential issues with storylines or character work, which I can totally understand a lot of that.
I think Infinity War might be the better film. I enjoy Endgame a lot more.
That's a question I wanted to ask, was how you, comparing the two, which one would you give an edge to?
Oh, man.
I want to see this movie a second time before I, really decide, because I think a lot of, I don't know, it was so much to take in, 3 hours, and all the character arcs that go on throughout it, whereas I've seen Infinity War so many times now, and it definitely feels like, as a standalone film, Infinity War may be the better film, because the Endgame was just focused on wrapping up this whole saga.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree, because I think for me, Infinity War has the edge in that Infinity War is better paced and has a clear focus of Thanos is coming, first interaction with conflict, Thanos fight, snap. Versus Endgame sort of has this thing of, we need to accept our new reality. Oh, we've discovered time travel. Let's have a fun time travel heist. And then, let's have a final epic battle. I think that zigzags a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I love every minute of that zigzag, but it zigzags. And I think Infinity War has a more clear-cut, rising action to a climax to a resolution.
I don't think I want to have an opinion yet, because I think I want to watch Infinity War again and Endgame again. Just, have it better in my memory.
Yeah, I reserved the right to change my mind as I review this movie multiple times.
I totally agree.
Yeah, for me, I think I want to watch again, like you said. I've seen Infinity War probably about 4 or 5 times now, but the 3 or 4 times that I watched it after seeing it the one time in the theater, I didn't watch for many months after, and then I realized, wow, this has kind of a great rewatch value, because seeing it the first time, I was kind of I don't want to watch that again for a while, because that ending just depressed the crap out of me. But then going back and rewatching it, I realized it had a great rewatch value with really good character work, a lot of great humor, keeping, like you said, a good pace movie, balance between action and character building and dialogue and whatnot. Infinity War is very good at that. So I'm not sure I'm going to have an opinion yet with Endgame. I feel like in the future I'm going to watch Infinity War more because kind of like with the Harry Potter series, which I'm a massive fan of, I very infrequently find myself going back to watch the last movie, even though it is, in my opinion, one of the best of the Harry Potter series, because I don't like constantly giving myself that feeling of, okay, it's over, it's done. It's over, it's done. I like kind of giving myself that open-endedness, and I feel like Endgame has that very resolved, satisfying feeling where I will kind of feel subconsciously after watching it, I'll be like, I feel like I can't watch an MCU movie again for a while.
Yeah.
But as we move into Phase 4 and Homecoming and further MCU movies being released...
Black Widow.
Black Widow.
I'm so excited about that one.
Yes.
Still have no freaking idea how it's going to happen, but I'm excited for it.
I saw I was watching a video earlier that the proposed synopsis for it right now is it would take place in 2006 and follow like Black Widow possibly like working with S.H.I.E.L.D. as an agent trying to find superheroes essentially.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's a theoretical synopsis. I don't know if that's official.
I want to know her like past though.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, because there was that line in Endgame where like Red Skull knows her dad, and Jeremy Renner's like, "Oh, he knows your dad," and she's like, "I didn't know."
Yeah.
Also, how did Red Skull end up there?
He grabbed the Space Stone in the first Captain America, and as punishment for trying to collect the Infinity Stones, he was sent to the Guard of the Soul Stone.
Interesting.
I guess was pretty immediately deemed unworthy of harnessing them, which is just a testament to how freaking lame he was. Because he couldn't even grab one of them, whereas Thornos. That's the fan fiction I want to see.
I guarantee you it exists already.
Good lord. But whereas Thanos was basically picking them like grapes on a vine, he had no problem. Yeah. And so, kind of a testament to how wimpy Red Skull was. Yeah. And so, in retrospect, kind of funny in my opinion. But, so I found that interesting too. That was a little strange. I remember actually seeing Infinity War with you and a few others, and I remember when Red Skull came into frame for the first time, you went, wait, what? And I actually remember that clear as day. But yeah, so overall, I loved this movie.
I loved this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're listening to this, hopefully you've seen it already. If you haven't, what are you doing? Like, why did you do that to yourself? Like,
we gave you plenty of warning.
Stop being nonconformist and just go.
Yeah. We gave you plenty of warning. You have nobody but yourself to blame.
Yeah, exactly. But if you haven't seen it already, for whatever reason, I highly recommend it. Go see it. It's a really fun theater-going experience with a lot of people as well. You get some really good laughs. You get some really good tears. I think you get a lot of great out of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
So
good tears.
Yeah, good tears.
Lots of tears. Lots of.
You get some bad tears too, but some just freaking bitter tears. But yeah, so that'll do it for this episode of Real Underdogs. Thank you again, Josh Gann, for
thank you, Josh.
joining us this week as a special guest.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast, guys. I wish there was more end games out there so I could, chime in more often. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. You can listen to Josh's sports podcast. It's called Gann the Fan, and it's on
Spotify.
It's on Spotify, so give that a listen. You can also go to his Gann the Fan blog. What's the website address for that?
It's just ganthefan.com.
There you go.
Easy enough.
Yeah,
simple.
But that will do it for this episode of Real Underdogs. Real Underdogs is produced by me, John Battiston. My panelists are Karlyn, Chen, and Trent Neely. Special guest Josh Gann. Our music is by Ross Walter. And thanks once again to Virginia Tech Libraries for giving us the equipment and space necessary to record this episode. So until next time, movie lovers, assemble.
Love you 3000.
Oh.
Trent, why?
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.